Hey, what's up everyone? Today's video is thanks to a comment left by krosan on the Unpopular Planeswalkers video where they suggested that I cover unpopular mana dorks. If you're not familiar with my channel, each unpopular video topic comes actually from the comment section. I'm not going to lie, previously it was kind of randomized and I'd bring some topics to my patrons and they would vote on the topic. But moving forward, I'm going to make it much more predictable and straightforward for viewers. And I am going to post a video topic on the comment that receives the most likes. And so with each of these videos, I'm going to invite viewers to leave a comment about what topic they'd like to cover next. And a few days after posting, I will pin the top liked comment and that will become a video. I'll still have my tier 2 and tier 3 patrons vote on other topics. But yeah, with that being said, drop a comment on what you'd like to see covered next, and that will become a video if it gets liked and voted on by other viewers. As always, we're going to start with honorable mentions. I will caveat that there are a lot of green mana dorks that I did not include in this. There were so many on my short list that I was like, yeah, if I include green, then it's pretty much going to take up the entire video. So maybe I'll do that for another video. I will still include them here and there, but a lot of these are intentionally not just mono green mana dorks. Our first honorable mention is Orcish Lumberjack, which is in 36,800 decks. As a 1-drop, this guy is an absolute beast. The forest itself doesn't have to be untapped, so you could drop this on turn 1, play a forest on turn 2, tap that forest for mana, then sacrifice it to have access to 5 mana on turn 2 without a Soul Ring or any mana rock. This can also help to cast an Etali Primal Conqueror on turn 3, and with the amount of land recursion from graveyard these days, this isn't nearly as much of a limitation as it was when this card was printed. Thornvault Forager is in 30,600 decks. This little guy is nice, being able to tap for 1 or 2 mana, and sacrificing a food token is extremely easy. So that's pretty beneficial. And then tutoring a squirrel to hand is really nice when you no longer need the mana itself in a given turn later in the game. Heronblade Elite is in 30,000 decks. This one is nice because it doesn't count counters, it's just power. So equipment and other anthem effects also increase the amount of mana that's produced. And a nice other addition is the Vigilance, because it kind of sucks to buff up this creature, it's all big, and then you just tap it. So with Vigilance you can attack, get the attack triggers and anything else from equipment, and then tap it and get the best of both worlds. Magus of the Coffers is in 23,500 decks. This one is a little on the expensive side in terms of CMC, but if you are able to get this on the battlefield, it's pretty much a Cabal Coffers on a stick. So if you have a deck that generates a ton of mana with Cabal Coffers, this is another option that you can consider for massive ramp. Omen Hawker is in 23,400 decks. This one is just a classic, and I love casting it as a 1-drop on turn 1. This pretty much is a guaranteed free clue token draw each time it's untapped. Yes, it can do other things, but I really like using it mostly to help me refill my hand for free in decks that create a lot of clue tokens. Hydroman Fluid Felon is in 3,300 decks. This one is pretty cool and also pretty difficult to get rid of unless someone wants to use one of their instant speed removal spells on a mana dork, which is pretty unlikely. But this does become a land when it's not your turn, and it taps for blue, which is relevant in control decks, or any blue deck playing heavy amounts of interaction. And our last honorable mention is Krark Clan Stoker, who is in 1,760 decks. This is a great ability that gives you 2 red mana for sacrificing an artifact token, or maybe an artifact that has an ETB or LTB effect that wants to be sacrificed anyways. And if you do have Goblin Haste enablement, this can almost refund its cost immediately, which is always nice as well. As is the standard moving forward, I made a bonus extended cut video for my tier 2 and tier 3 patrons, which includes 15 cards that didn't make the cut in this video, but I think we're still awesome picks that I think should be considered if you are looking for unpopular mana dorks. The link is in the description if you want to check it out. And like I said in my last video, I'll post 3 to 5 of these bonus cut videos every single month moving forward. In terms of the actual cards that we're going to cover in depth today, our first one is Illuminor szeras, who is in 23,400 decks. So this is a 3 mana legendary artifact creature Necron that costs 2 generic and 1 black. It says tap, sacrifice another creature. Add an amount of black mana equal to the sacrificed creature's mana value. So the first thing I will say when I read this, I was expecting it to cost a lot more than 3 mana. So that was a pleasant surprise to me to see the good rate on an ability with that high of a ceiling when it comes to generating mana. It is kind of unfortunate in my opinion that it doesn't add mana equal to the creature's power, but rather goes off mana value. This means that you can't ramp by sacrificing your creature tokens, but this still can be really good in reanimator decks that bring back super massive expensive creatures. I think once you do hit a certain threshold of expensive creatures, the higher mana creatures don't necessarily equate to an insane level of power or toughness. It's a super strong ability that makes up the difference between the expected power and toughness for a creature and their high mana value. But for this ability, I mean, even 3 or 4 mana for a tap ability can put you super far ahead of the curve and gain so much value. So you don't need to sacrifice a huge CMC creature for Illuminor to be worth its spot in the 99. I think this creature is also cool because it's legendary, so you can build around this intentionally, as mentioned, where maybe you reanimate huge creatures, sacrifice them to get 10 plus black mana, then use that to actually cast one from your hand and pretty much get 2 massive ETB effects in a single turn. For any decks that care about artifacts, this is also an artifact creature, so it is tutorable with a lot of artifact tutors. Did anyone here buy the Warhammer precons where this originated from? If so, which of the precons did you play and how did you like it? I'd love to hear. Next up is Housquad Heavy, who is in 21,600 decks. This is a 3 mana goblin mercenary 2/3. It has start your engines, and other goblins you control have haste. At the beginning of combat on your turn, create a 1/1 red goblin creature token. That token attacks this combat if able. Then, when you have max speed, you can tap Housquad Heavy to add 1 red for each goblin you control. Okay, I know. This is from EDHREC, and most people think that max speed mechanic sucks outside of dedicated max speed decks, or even that it just sucks in general, even if you are in a max speed deck, because it just takes so long to get to max speed. But I really do think that this is awesome, especially if you're not trying to win on turn 3 or turn 4. I've always had a lot of fun playing max speed. I do like Housquad Heavy in particular because the abilities are very relevant and useful while you are building up your speed in the early game, and so it's not just a do nothing until you reach max speed. Dependably creating a token each combat is great. And, there's so many effects in red that deal damage when another creature ETBs, or you can sacrifice a creature to Goblin Bombardment. There's things that have extra effects when you create a token. There's just a lot of things you can do, from generating consistently a goblin on each of your turns. Also, giving haste to goblins is one of the best things that you can do for that tribe, which is why goblin haste enablers are in pretty much every Cranko deck that has ever existed. If you are throwing this in a mono red deck that isn't goblins, requiring the token to attack can kind of be a rough requirement, because if all your opponents have creatures, you don't really have many goblins for the mana ability when you finally do reach max speed. So if that is the case, this could actually be a pretty good fit in a vehicle deck where you can create the tokens and then crew your vehicles so that you don't have to attack with that goblin. So you'll have amassed a lot of goblins to add mana when you finally do hit your max speed. The last thing that I'll say is, ever since EDHREC has dropped, I've been slotting in some even just single instances of start your engines in my decks. like Muruganda Raceway, because the 2 mana payoff is great for not much of a downside while I'm waiting to reach max speed. There's so many ways for an opponent to lose life in their turn. Heck, they could even crack like one of their lands and lose 1 life, and that ticks up your speed. Let me know your take, but I mentioned this to say that you don't have to slot this in a dedicated Start Your Engines deck to benefit greatly from this card as a mana dork. Next up, we have Red Death Shipwrecker. This is a 2 mana 1/3 crab mutant that has an ability called Alluring Eyes. It's tap, goad target creature an opponent controls. That player draws a card. You add 1 red mana. My brother plays this card in his Furcrag deck, and he says that this is one of his favorites, and it always does so much work. Goad in general is just an excellent mechanic, both from a protective standpoint, but also from a politics perspective, and an offensive tool as well. So as a tap ability, you can activate it whenever you want, to which, that's obviously nice. So you can have access to the red mana for instant speed interaction when you want it. I'm going to counter what I think is one of the biggest objections of this card, and that's people see this and they don't want to give card draw to their opponents. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. But I will also say that there are more support cards being printed that benefit you when an opponent draws their second card in a turn. So, for example, the Avatar set released. The Unagi of Kyoshi Island is one of the new cards, which has an ability that says whenever an opponent draws their second card each turn, you draw 2 cards. So you could use that card plus Red Death Shipwrecker to goad an opponent's creature in their first main phase. They draw their second card of the turn, and this just becomes tap, goad target creature, add 1 red mana, draw 2 cards. So I really like that. But also just the addition of adding that opponent, they draw a card, it makes this very versatile as a politic piece. If an opponent has a way to tap their creature and not have to actually attack and lose their value engine, you can make some big deals with them to give them some card draw in exchange for something that you want. This level of politicking and protective ability is super unique for a mana dork and is what earned it as a top spot in this, in this video today. But I'm curious, is anyone else playing this card? If so, let me know if you like it and if there's anything that I missed about this ability. Before we get to our next card today, I'm going to run the giveaway wheel spin for November for a Baldur's Gate Collector Booster Pack. This is for patrons that I run every month. So yeah, let's shuffle up. And nice. Okay, congrats SP Bay on the win. Thank you so much for being a patron. I will reach out to your email to get a shipping address so that we can get that to you. Best of luck in your pools. Up next, we have Spider Manifestation, who is in 13,000 decks. So this is a 2 mana spider avatar that is a 2/2. It has reach and tap. Add 1 red or 1 green. And whenever you cast a spell with mana value 4 or greater, untap this creature. Okay, so before we get into this ability itself, the keywords and stat line on this aren't a terrible starting place for a 2 mana mana torque. Being able to block flying threats in the late game is a nice touch for this spider avatar creature. I've had so many times where I have a 1 toughness creature that dies over the course of the game just as a result of collateral damage, from some random effect somewhere. Whether that's Orcish Bowmasters or someone sacrificing to Goblin Bombardment, they're like, might as well kill that Atlanta War Elf because why not? Cutting off someone's mana source is better than 1 measly damage to someone's face. And so the fact that this is 2/2 instead of 1/1 will help it to survive some of that collateral damage when someone just has 1 damage to toss around and they're like, might as well let's toss it at that mana dork. But now getting to this actual card, the hybrid mana may seem insignificant, but in a 3+ mana deck, the flexibility of using green or red makes it much more of a dependable 2-drop for budget players. So it's kind of like the argument against Chromatic Lantern, where people are like, yeah, that card sucks. And yeah, I know why you feel that way. It's not necessary in higher power decks and higher budget decks, that can afford expensive lands or don't mind proxying. But for anyone who is playing on a budget, this, chromatic lantern is a staple. It's incredible. I think the same argument applies here when it comes to the hybrid mana take when we're talking about 3+ mana decks. Yes, if I had the perfect mana base, this costing 1 generic and 1 green shouldn't really make that much of a difference than it costing 1 generic and 1 green or 1 red. But I don't have perfect mana bases, and I personally don't proxy. That's just out of personal preference. But having that flexibility to, in a 3 or 4 color deck, be able to spend 1 generic and 1 red or 1 green makes it so much more dependable that I'm more likely to hit this on turn 2 in my super budget decks. Let me know what you think, but yeah, I feel much more comfortable slotting this into, let's say, if I had an Aragorn deck and I have this in my starting hand, than if it was just 1 red or 1 green. But yeah, love to hear your take. I do love creatures that can untap themselves, especially ones that don't have a limit as to how many times they can untap in a single turn. What's underrated about this creature as well is the fact that this counts any kind of spell, not just creatures, which we'd typically expect in Gruul. So this means that it accrues a lot of value in decks that cast spells, maybe like an Aragorn type deck or Teamer decks focused on spells. So let's take Mizzix's Mastery for example. Even without overloading the spell, this can refund 2 mana from casting Mizzix's Mastery. So you pay 4 to cast Mizzix's Mastery, then untap Spider Manifestation as part of the cast trigger because it's 4 mana, and then you tap it again to float a green or a red mana. Next, you target another 4 mana spell in your graveyard and cast it as part of the resolution of Mizzix's Mastery, and then untap Spider Manifestation once more. You could also pair this with enchantments that allow for multiple casts, so maybe something like Arcane Bombardment, and then this little guy can add up with a lot of untap abilities. Honest question here, I know that Spider-Man is an insanely hated set, but are there any cards that you love from the set that you are playing in your decks? If so, I'd love to hear what ones and what you think about them. Next up, we have Selvala Eager Trailblazer. This is in 8,710 decks. It's 4 mana for a 4/5. It has Vigilance, and whenever you cast a creature spell, create a 1/1 red mercenary creature token with tap. Target creature you control gets +1/+0 until end of turn. Activate only as a sorcery. Tap, choose a color, add 1 mana of that color for each different power among creatures that you control. I'm always happy to play this card, as once it is on the battlefield, it can do so much in accelerating your game plan. So first of all, this is an excellent creature token generator. Granted, they are just 1/1 tokens, but in a Selesnya deck, the power and toughness of the creatures don't usually matter as much as the quantity of those creatures instead. There are so many cards that scale with the number of creatures you control, and this helps to boost that. Outside of the token generation, this is great because Selvala can attack, and with Vigilance, you can be sneaky in holding up interaction or protection or buff spells. Opponents see the tapped out mana rocks and lands, and they forget that from one single creature, you have enough mana to cast in a Chroma's Will, because this can easily tap for 4 mana. Or when it's not on your turn, you can use it to cast single-handedly, tap Selvala to cast a Teferi's Protection, or an Unbreakable Formation on an opponent's turn. The tokens that it does create can also help break parity of creature powers, since it takes into account how many different creature powers you have. If you have 2 creatures with the same power, you can then tap one of the mercenaries to give one of them +1, so now you have more power spread across the creatures to add that much more mana. Our next card today is Osgood Operation Double, who sees play in 6,920 decks. So this is a 4 mana creature. It's Human Alien Shapeshifter. It costs 2 generic and 2 blue, and it says when you cast the spell, create a token that's a copy of it, except it isn't legendary. You can tap it to add 1 colorless, spend this mana only to cast an artifact spell or activate an ability of an artifact. Then it has Paradox that says whenever you cast a spell from anywhere other than your hand, investigate. So there's a lot of text on this, and all of them are pretty good in their own ways. So the first part is that this creates 2/2/2 creatures for 4 mana. If that were just it, if it only created 2/2/2s, that wouldn't really mean anything, but it's the fact that this doubles up the other abilities that makes this card great. And if you happen to bounce this back to your hand, you'll get a third copy the next time that you cast it as well. So having both of these creatures add colorless mana, which can help cast artifact spells and activated abilities. If this were the only ability as well, this also wouldn't be anything notable. Having the creature to tap for mana but nothing really on the board or in hand doesn't really do anything for you. So it's kind of having this third ability that nicely wraps together all of these other things, all in one. So when you cast a single spell from anywhere out of hand, you don't just investigate once, but twice. So this goes well with a lot of different abilities. There's things like Foretell, Plot, Jumpstart. There's casts from your library like Fibblethip, Lost on the Range. This works with adventure spells, Disturb, cards like Torrential Gearhulk, which can cast things from your graveyard. There's Flashback, Rebound, and so many more things like that. Then if you have an Academy Manufactor on the battlefield, you create 6 artifacts for casting one single spell. Then you can do a ton of things with those artifacts once you have a lot of them on the battlefield. I was also thinking of sharing Nardole Resourceful Cyborg, which is cool and comes back when it dies and also adds more mana as a result. But we've covered a lot of these blue mana dorks now, so I didn't go in depth in that one. If you are enjoying these picks, I'll share one of my favorite unpopular green mana dorks in my upcoming Unpopular MTG report this Sunday. I send an email each Sunday as a quick, read for an unpopular card or topic. If that does sound interesting to you, the link is in the description below. Up next, we have Priest of Yawgmoth, who is in 1,460 decks. So this is a 2-mana creature. It's kind of a lot. It says a lot on the original card, but I'm just going to read the updated Scryfall version. So the updated Scryfall version says that this is a Phyrexian human cleric instead of just summon cleric. And the ability says, tap, sacrifice an artifact. Add an amount of black mana equal to the sacrifice artifact's mana value. So first off, I think this art is just so cool. I don't know what's going on in this image at all, but it feels so authentic and I love it. 2, this card is not for everyone, but I wanted to include this as an option for people who just didn't know that this card exists. Yes, it is 2 mana, which I love. It's pretty cheap, and this can add a ton of mana in a single turn, but I don't think it sees a lot of play because maybe just a lot of people aren't playing artifact decks, where you're okay with sacrificing non-artifact creatures or just non-token artifacts in general. However, in the right decks, I think that this can be a massive boon of mana. For example, you could unearth a Cityscape Leveler, then get the value from it attacking, then sacrifice it to get 8 black mana before it gets exiled anyways. The top commanders playing this are Greasefang Okiba Boss, which, seeing that, suggests that people are probably pitching vehicles into their graveyard, then they cheat them out with Greasefang's ability, crew it and attack it, then sacrifice it to get mana and put it back into the graveyard to then just do that again next turn. So that way the vehicle is still in the graveyard next turn and they don't have to figure out a way to get it from your hand into the graveyard once more. And then you can continue that cycle every turn. Imskir Iron Eater is another one, and Glissa the Trader are the other commanders rounding out the top 3 playing this. Let me know, have you ever seen this played before? It's only in 1,000 something decks, so it's not very popular, but pretty cool and super old. If there is anything that you see that you like today enough to buy, it does mean a lot if you do choose to use my TCG affiliate link in the description below. It's a small matter, but very much appreciated for those who do decide to support the channel that way. We have just 2 left. The next one is Seton Krosan Protector, who is in 1,240 decks. So this is a 3 mana creature. It's all 3 green pips, and it's a Centaur Druid legend. It says tap an untapped Druid you control. Add 1 green mana to your mana pool. So I wasn't thinking of it including this initially, but I think there's more Druids out there than people realize, which makes this ability so much better. At its floor, this can tap itself at instant speed to add 1 green mana. A lot of other abilities say tap another untapped druid, but this doesn't specify another, so it counts itself. If this is your commander, you'll of course play a lot of druids to add a lot of mana, but this can also go well in the 99 of several commanders. For example, Teval the Balanced Scale doesn't just create 2/2 zombies, it creates 2/2 black zombie druids. So Seton's ability doesn't enable the druids themselves to tap for mana, but he does it himself. So what this means is that those tokens can be tapped even when they have summoning sickness, which can just lead to crazy amounts of value. This can also go well in a Omo Queen of Vesuva deck, because each non-land creature, including tokens by the way, are every creature type, which means they are also druids, so you can create a ton of creature tokens, you can immediately tap them to add a green mana, and with a token doubler, then that just goes even more crazy. Our last card tonight is Rasputin Dreamweaver, who is in 422 decks, but notably also it helms 700 decks as a commander, so that number is just a little above 1,000. There are a lot of things that I love about this. Let's read this guy. It's 6 mana. It's 4 generic, 1 white and 1 blue. It says Rasputin Dreamweaver enters the battlefield with 7 dream counters on it. Remove a dream counter from Rasputin. Add 1 generic to your mana pool. Remove a dream counter from Rasputin to prevent the next 1 damage that would be dealt to it this turn. And at the beginning of your upkeep, if Rasputin started the turn untapped, put a dream counter on it. Rasputin can't have more than 7 dream counters on it. So that's a lot of text, which is probably enough for a lot of people to never read it in the first place. But first of all, this guy refunds itself +1 in colorless mana the turn that it comes down. So you can use that all at once if you want, or you could use it intermittently as you'd like. Maybe you can pay a lot of Rhystic Study triggers with this guy. A second thing that's great about this is it's upon entering, so not casting. So you can blink this to get 7 free mana each time you blink it for like an ephemerate. If this is your commander, you can blink this multiple times, take off the counters each time, and cast some huge, crazy Eldrazi spell. And lastly, this card it's old, so it doesn't have the modern day limitations that we see on crazy abilities like this, like activate at sorcery speed, or you can only remove 1 or 2 each turn, or the fact that this is an ETB instead of a cast trigger are all things that are going for this that make this so much better, because when this guy was created, there weren't so many cheap blink spells and ways to get the commander value that often. I think the true limitation, of course, is the fact that this guy is very pricey. He costs $116. So if you are into vintage Magic or you're fine with proxying, then this is as unpopular as it gets when it comes to mana dorks for your Azorius Blink decks. Well, that's everything that I got for this video. As mentioned, I intentionally didn't include green mana dorks, which I have like 20 more of. So if that ever does win, I could do a video on unpopular green mana dorks. As mentioned in the beginning, comment what topic you'd like me to cover next, and the top liked comment will become a video. So thanks so much for being here, and we'll see you next time.